Hello and thank you for joining me on another episode on my Devlog series. Now let's get started. In my previous video, I discussed about the game I'm working on, what features I would like to add to it, and the general gameplay I have in mind for it. Obviously, these might change and probably also will on the course of its creation, but it's a good starting point to have an overall idea about what the final product would look like nonetheless. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you to check my previous video as well, because that way you will have a better understanding of what I am talking about. You can find a link to it in the description below. Also, in the previous video, I've made a mistake that cost me a lot of time during implementation. You might not have noticed it, but those familiar with tile sets probably already laughed at me. Because of this, I thought it would be nice to have a section, if possible in every video, where I discuss some mistakes I made during the coding process. In this week's development mistakes, I will show you the mistake I made in the following clip taken from previous week's episode. In the end, I ended up with adding rigid bodies and colliders to all my objects. The walls had kinematic set to them, and my character was dynamic with its gravity scale set to 0, and therefore it didn't fall downwards. Whenever it hit the wall, it just stopped moving. The mistake I made here was that I didn't do enough research on tile maps, and instead I started working with them after the first tutorial I've watched. After releasing my previous video, I accidentally stumbled upon another tutorial that talked about tile maps, and there I found out that the tilemap collider 2D component did exactly what I spent about 30 minutes trying to make work with a more complicated approach. After I was done with the movement and animation implementations, the first thing I wanted to do is to implement a progress bar above the workspace, so I knew how much time my character spent working and how much was left. Afterwards, I made the crafting action interruptible and implemented a button to test this functionality by moving my character away and back to the crafting bench. This was working well, but I first had an issue where the timer didn't start from 0, but I quickly fixed that and the progress bar was working perfectly in no time. Next, I've imported some weapon sprites so that I could simulate the crafting of weapons, and I found this awesome package on OpenGameArt from a guy named Kairise, whose name I completely butchered, but you can check him out on OpenGameArt or itch.io. I quickly imported the sprites into a game, and after some resizing, I was ready to work with them. This was the perfect moment for me to start learning about scriptable objects, which is a way of storing data in Unity. And even though I thought it would be a really tedious process, after some tutorials and thanks to Bracky's videos, I managed to fully understand how to use scriptable objects, and therefore I managed to make different items in my game using them. Soon after, I had a working crafting process where a random item spawned after the worker finished its job at the working place. Next, I wanted to make a scrolling view that appeared when you clicked on the workspace and showed you a list of items that you could craft at a given moment. This was the perfect moment to get rid of the button I made to test the crafting functionality. This was a two-step process where first I created the entry in the scroll view, which had the icon of the item you want to craft, its name, some random information about it that was currently randomized, and all this was put on a button so I can handle its event. I think for now these entries are looking perfect and I'm really happy with how they turned out. After I was done, I was ready to tackle the harder problem, using scrolling views. Luckily, Unity has a really nice documentation on them, and it was quite easy for me to understand how they worked. It was quite simple for me to add items to the scrolling view, but the first issue I encountered was the sizes and the positions of these objects. Luckily, thanks to some more tutorials and more digging in the Unity documentation about them, I've managed to make this beautiful crafting list that appears when you click on the workbench. With all this being done, I thought it would be a great idea to also display the item that is currently being crafted next to the progress bar. So I quickly redesigned the progress bar canvas so it also contained a sprite that dynamically changed based on the current item that is created. I'm actually really happy with how this turned out. As mentioned in my previous video when I talked about in-game features, when crafting an item, there should be a chance for a better quality to be crafted than the base. This could make the item more valuable and obviously stronger. For that, I needed to come up with a solution to store all that data about the items and their upgrades efficiently. Scriptable objects seem like the best choice for this problem, and because I learned to use them recently, it was also a great opportunity to practice their usage. I would like to explain my chosen solution through some illustrations using my super awesome drawing skills, and at the same time, I would like to ask you to let me know if you like these kind of explanations and if I should make more in the future. Currently, an item object looks like this. It has rarity, cost, and value. As the rarity can vary, I will need different stats for these items. Therefore, I want to make one scriptable object that is the item which holds multiple subsets of the same base based on their rarity. This way, when the worker crafts an item, it will randomly be given one of these types. With all this implemented and working, I was ready for the last feature I wanted to implement for this week's video, an inventory system. Because I spent quite some time and effort learning about scrolling views, I decided to again reuse this knowledge and make an inventory system using this view. First, I created a button and a scrolling view for the inventory. I wanted to use the button to show and hide the inventory, but I soon found out that what I actually needed instead was a toggle type object. The difference between the two is that while the button opened my inventory while it was pressed and closed it on release, the toggle opened and closed the inventory on different press events. As its name also suggests, it toggled the state of the linked object. With the graphical setup done, I was ready to start adding some items to the inventory. The general idea was that whenever an item was created, it automatically transferred from the workspace into the inventory. There, you can also see the rarity of the item that was crafted based on their name, name color, and icon. As you can see, for now the inventory entry design I used is the one I created for the crafting menu. And with that being said, we are slowly getting to the end of this video. You might have noticed the table in the last few scenes, but that is for another video. Now, before going any further, let's not forget the most important thing, saving our progress. It is mandatory because otherwise our progress might get lost in no time. Good. With that out of the way, I have a small announcement to share with you guys. In the next couple of weeks, I will be busy with some personal things and therefore I might not be able to upload in 2 weeks' time. I will do my best to at least have a shorter update video, but I won't promise anything. After my schedule frees up again, I will be back to uploading at least every 2 weeks, but I have some plans that might allow me to upload more frequently. But until then, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, it would help me a lot if you could share this with your friends. Thank you for joining me on another episode, and see you next time.